Okay, welcome back to Java Video Tutorials. This is lesson 5 and we're going to be starting on variables. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Dr. Java, and I think we're going to do this lesson in our regular coding view, no interactions pane this time. So I'm going to get started. Where's Dr. Java? Where did he go? Here he is. Let me get that in your view real fast. And we're going to get started with a public class variables. So I'm just calling this class variables. You can call it whatever you want. Make sure you capitalize it. And I'm going to give it a public static void main method. Okay, so that's string array args. And here we go. So let's start out. Variables. What are variables? Variables are basically just named values that you can assign in a programming language, and they can change, they can stay the same, but the main thing is you want to use variables instead of constants to make your programs dynamic. So let's go over different types of variables. We can store different types of data in these variables, and the most obvious type is just some kind of number. And so in Java we have, I believe there's 6 different data types for numbers, and we're going to go through all those really quickly here. I'm going to start out with the two most common that I use, and those happen to be integer, which you can specify by int for int. And so let's create an integer variable, and it's going to be int, and we'll call we can name the variable anything we want. So we can call it my integer, and an integer obviously has just a whole number. It's not going to have a decimal, so it can be positive or negative, and so we can say my integer equals 5, and make sure you terminate your line with a semicolon. So now we have my integer equals 5, and let's say we want to print out that integer. So I'll say system.out.println, and there's not going to be any quotes because I'm not printing out a string, so I'm just going to say print out my integer, and then we should be able to just go ahead and run this program. So I'm going to quickly compile it, and I'm going to save it somewhere. I don't know where I'll save it. I don't know where. Oh, here we go, Java Video Tuts, and I'll just save it. Variables.java. Okay. So there we completed our compilation, and let's go ahead and run it by typing Java variables. And you can see it printed out the number 5 because it printed out my integer, which was equal to 5. So the println method, it knows it can take in an integer data type, and when it takes in that integer data type, it knows to just print out that integer. So the println method is written so it can take in several different data types. Like in the first lesson, we gave it a string for hello world, and we're going to give it a few different data types here. So I'm going to turn this into my second most common number data type, which is called a double. And a double is what I use for floating point values. So I'm just going to call it my double, and I want to give it a floating point value, so it can be, negative 23.8, and that would be an acceptable double value. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to double here and compile it. And if I rerun that Java variables, you can see it just prints out negative 23.8. Nothing special going on here. And so we can also add our variables. So I created my double. Let's go back and create my integer. Set it equal to 5, and then let's say double sum, and we want to add these two variables together. Well, that's just going to be my double plus my integer, and terminate that line with a semicolon, and we're going to print out sum, and here we go. compile and run. Negative 18.8 is indeed negative 23.8 plus 5. So this double is able to be added to an integer, and it'll just give me a double in return. So that's why I specified this double variable sum is equal to my double plus my integer, even though my integer is an int data type. It can be added to this double data type. So let's quickly go over the other data types. We have the smallest, most simple one is called byte, and I hardly ever use anything but integer and double, but just so you know they exist, I can say byte b equals, and this I believe can be anywhere from negative 128 to positive 127. And the way I can check that down here in the interactions window is I can say byte, and note that's with a capital B because it's wrapped up in a wrapper class. We'll get to that later, but byte dot max value, and that'll return 127, and then I can say min value negative 128. So byte, I can, if I try to assign it to like 129, then that's going to generate an error for me. Error found, possible loss of precision, so I need to make sure that stays less than 128. So okay, I need to print out B here. Oops. Okay, compile, and we complete, and obviously we can run that and it will print out that byte variable. The next one is a short, and it's also an integer data type, and the only difference between short, int, and byte so far is the range of values it can hold. So let's go ahead and type short.max value, and we get 32767, and we can do min value. And you might notice, you might be wondering why it's not negative 32768 to positive 32768. Instead it's 32767. Well, the reason is because we have 0. 0 is a number and it's got to be counted, so that's why you see that difference there. So we have that short, and then just for fun we can do integer dot max value, and it's quite a bit larger, and you probably won't go higher than that very often, but if you do, you can always use your long data type, which is huge, astronomically huge. So we have integer, which is what I use the most, and then our bytes, and then shorts, and then longs if you really need a big number. And those are all your integer data types. And if you want to use a floating point data type, I recommend double. I need those capital AX. And you can see this is pretty large here. It's 1.79, but look over here, times 10 to the 308. So that's very large. And there's also float, FLOAT. Float is another data type for floating point values, and it's a little bit smaller, and it goes times 10 to the 38. So those are your 8. Yeah, that was no 6 different number data types. We had the 4 integer data types and the 2 floating point value data types, and you can of course do your operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication among any of those. So if I wanted to, I could divide an integer by a float value or a long value by a double value, and it would not make a difference. But remember, if both values are integers, whether it's long, short, byte, or int, it will, and you're dividing, it will return an int. So if you have a decimal, it will just truncate it off. So let's go ahead and move to our other data types. There are two more. We have the char, or char as some people call it, and it's just C-H-A-R. And this is some kind of character, and the character data type can store one character, and that's it. So let's call it something my character equals, and the way you denote a character in Java is by the single quotation mark. And so let's say D, capital D. That is just a specific character, and it's not equal to a lowercase d. And there's some special things you can do with characters that you cannot do with strings in Java. So let's go ahead and print that out. And remember, strings are denoted with your double quotation marks like that. So if you see a single quotation mark, don't get confused and think it's a string, because it's not. Let's go ahead and compile that and go ahead and run it. Java variables. Obviously it'll print out a D for us, and that's capital D. It's not the same as a lowercase d, and that's a character. Each character in the Unicode set has a special code value, so I can add characters together if you want. So I can say int, sum equals my character plus a. And so let me print out sum, compile that, and I get 165. You're like, wow, where does 165 come from? Well, the D character has a certain value, and the way you can find the value of any character is if you go down here in the interactions pane, you can type that character like a D, and then you can add the 0 character. And that's not what I meant. I meant the 0 number. If you add 0, it'll give you the value of that character. So capital A is exactly 65, and then lowercase a is 97, and then you can, like, your 0 character is 48. So you can find out the different values of these characters. Do you really care? No. I don't know why I showed you that, just so you know. Whatever. Let's move on. Characters, yeah, a string. If you see a string, just know that's like a grouping of characters, and when we get into arrays, I'll talk more in depth about that later, but it's just a grouping of single character values together to create a string. Real quickly, another thing I can do, I can compare characters. I can say, well, is A greater than D? And that's false. I can say, X, and I can say A. So lowercase values, as you saw up here, have a higher number, so that will return true. So just so you know that, you can compare characters. And here we go. So our next data type is the last and easiest, and it's called the Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. You have to type out the whole word Boolean for you C++ junkies who just type bool all day long and think you're getting off easy. You're not. So Boolean, my Boolean equals true or false. That's all it can hold. True or false, not 1 or 0, true or false. So let's type true just because we're true and blue. My Boolean. Go ahead and compile that, and we're going to run that again. It prints out true. You cannot add Boolean values, so if I tried to say true plus true, I'd get some kind of error here, bad type in addition. And I believe we're done for today. Let's see, after variables we can do functions. Functions are very fun because they're very useful, and I'll look up my list of functions and see which ones we can write, make things kind of cool in here. So functions, then classes, and then we'll get into arrays and loops and all that good stuff in the future. But please stop by Java Video Tutorial, javavideotutes.com. If you have some money, make a donation, because I am just working off of nothing here, all coming out of my own pocket. My equipment, this microphone, this software, the hosting, the domain name, so it's all coming out of me, and I'd really appreciate a donation. And it might inspire me to record some more tutorials. So come over and have a shout, send me an email, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.